I'll have somebody else do this for me. Good evening. I'm Jennifer Kenneth Prince with the League of Women and Voters, Minnetonka, Eden Prairie, and Hopkins. Thank you all for coming this evening. I would especially like to thank the candidates for being part of the democratic process by running for office and being willing to serve our communities. Besides being nonpartisan political educators, the League also researches issues important to our members and to the health of our community. If you are interested in finding out more about what we do to make a difference, please join us. The League of Women Voters is open to anyone 16 years and older. Contact us at lvwmeph.org. You can find out more information about our candidates and voting at vote411.org. Thank you again for coming, and remember to vote on November 8th. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Kitty Western. Kitty is a League of Women Voters trained and certified moderator from Minneapolis. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kitty Weston, Advocacy Action Director of the League of Women Voters Minneapolis and moderator of tonight's forum. Good evening, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters Minnetonka, Eden Prairie, and Hopkins, I would like to welcome you to the Senate District 49 and House District 49 A and B Candidate Forum. We thank the candidates and the audience for attending tonight and for our viewing audience. The purpose of the candidate forum is to give District 49 voters an opportunity to hear candidates discuss the issues of importance to them in this election. The event is free and open to the public. Written questions were submitted by the public via email at League of Women Voters, Minnetonka, Eden Prairie, and Hopkins. We encourage candidates to have their supporters submit questions as well. The League of Women Voters does not support or oppose a political party or a candidate for office. League of Women Voters Minnetonka, Eden Prairie, and Hopkins have a long-standing history in our community of providing unbiased candidate and issue information that is widely used by Minnesota voters regardless of their political beliefs. There's never enough time to cover all of the issues. If you feel that your question was not addressed, please contact the candidates directly after the forum. Their contact information will be posted at the end of the forum for you not in attendance. For those of you in attendance, the candidates were instructed to place their materials on the tables in the lobby. We'll start with the candidate forum with opening statements. Each of the candidates have a 2-minute for their opening statement and 2-minute for their closing statement. Opening statements will be in alphabetical order, beginning with the Senate District 49 candidates and continuing on with the representative candidates for 49A and B. Candidates will have 1.5 minutes to respond to the questions. Questions will be asked in a rotating order so that each candidate has an opportunity to respond first and last. Our timekeeper, Sandy Brandt, will hold up a 15-second and a stop sign, and we ask that you honor these time limits. Okay, let's begin with opening questions, or opening statements. Candidate Swedinsky.
Thanks, Kitty. I grew up in Superior, Wisconsin. I came down to the cities and went to the University of Minnesota, being the first in my family to graduate. After 7 years at the U, I spent the next 31 years teaching American government and American history at Eden Prairie High School. I got married to my wife, Patty. We had 2 wonderful children, Eric and John, and we've lived in Eden Prairie now for the last 6 years. Teaching my students the importance of civic engagement, political efficacy, civic virtue, and the common good were at the center of the core of my curriculum. In 2017, I began to put those values into practice as your state senator. These shared values happen when people get together, put partisan politics aside, and work towards a shared vision. I believe that the meaning of life is to solve as much of the puzzle as possible before we perish. I'm running again to help solve as much of those puzzle pieces as possible for the people of Eden Prairie and Minnetonka and the state of Minnesota. My campaign is all about the 4C, about future. Crime. If we can ban switchblades and brass knuckles, I don't see why we can't ban assault weapons. Conservation. I missed 1 year going to the boundary waters since 1979. We need to do everything within our power to protect that national treasure. Classrooms. I spent more time in a classroom teaching more students than any senator in the history of the state of Minnesota. And civility. I am the DFL Senate Chair on what we call the Civility Caucus at the state legislature, a bipartisan, bicameral attempt to bridge the divides at the legislature. I believe that those 4 issues, crime, conservation, classrooms, and civility, are what we should all be working on in the foreseeable future.
Thank you.
4C.
Thank you. Senate candidate Helseth.
Thank you. My name is Marla Helseth, and I am running to be your next state senator for this district of Eden Prairie and Southern Minnetonka. I live here in Eden Prairie with my husband, Paul. We've been married 19 years and have 2 great kids, Greta and Benjamin. We've lived in Eden Prairie, right across the street actually, for 10 years, and before that, we lived in Minnetonka for 10 years as well. My husband grew up in the Glen Lake area, and his family, including my mother-in-law and others, still live in this district in Southern Minnetonka. My single mother moved me and my siblings to Minnesota from Illinois when I was about 10 years old, and I've been here ever since. I started working at a young age. My first job was at Dayton's when I was about 16 years old in the books and lamps department. I continued to work different jobs until graduating from Burnsville High School. Because there wasn't money for college, I moved by myself from Burnsville into Minneapolis and started working as a model and as an executive assistant for different corporations downtown. And I've also spent quite a few years in the hospitality industry managing restaurants. Other areas where I've served have been at my church in Minnetonka, Good Shepherd Presbyterian, and I served with a team of teachers at orphanages in Zambia, Africa in 2001. I'm currently a church liaison for a ministry called Hospitality House in North Minneapolis as well. I stopped working outside the home to help raise our kids, and after they had been in school for a while, my most recent job has been as a teacher at my kids' school. And next to being my kid's mother, that has been my favorite and most rewarding job. I'm running to bring a new energy, a new perspective, and new ideas and new leadership to the Minnesota Senate, and I would love to earn your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, Representative Chase, District 49A.
Thank you, and thank you to all that you have come tonight. It's great to see a lot of people out there, great smiling faces, and everybody online. I'm Ryan Chase. I'm running for the House of Representatives in District 49A. A little history from me is I grew up out in Mound, west end of Lake Minnetonka, and first moved to Eden Prairie when I was going to the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul. Commuted over to St. Paul while also commuting to Minneapolis on Lake Street, where I was working there for a couple of years during college. My wife and I moved from Bloomington after we were married for about 10 years to Eden Prairie. So we've been here for about 6 years. We have 2 sons, and just really, really enjoy the community, love the area. And I want to bring positive change to the area. I'm running on the economy and making sure that we have a great budget that points to the priorities that matter to us as a state and locally. I'm also running on public safety because we've seen some pretty drastic changes over the last few years. We need to get that straightened out. I'm very passionate because I want to leave a community to my kids that's better than the way I found it. And then finally, education. We're right in the start of education, getting our sons into school, and it is a very important thing to me. Where we've seen the last few years, things have come down from a competency standpoint. We've got to get that going back in the right direction again. Again, my name's Ryan Chase, running for 49A. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Representative Candidate Pryor, also from 49A.
Thank you. Thank you, League of Women Voters, audience members, and those watching online. Thank you for participating. I'm State Representative Lori Pryor, currently in my third term. I'm running to represent you in House District 49A. I love our community, and I've lived here for more than 30 years. During that time, I've had many leadership roles. Well, obviously being a state representative is one of them, but I've also been a mentor for teens, a youth coach, and a coordinator for volunteers supporting mental health programs. As your state representative, I will continue to advocate for excellence in education, strong economic opportunities, high quality and affordable healthcare, and safe neighborhoods. Some advice I received when preparing for this debate was to let people know something that I've achieved that I'm proud of. And what I'm proud of is that I've been a good listener. I've listened not just to my colleagues and advocates, but I've listened to my constituents. I've knocked on thousands of doors and thousands of doors. I've had hundreds and hundreds of conversations with families in our district. I've listened to their views on issues, but more importantly, we've talked about their hopes and their fears. These conversations that reflect on our common values are what I use to decide what policies are best for achieving our common good. Especially now in our political climate that has become so polarized, it will be good to have a listener in the legislature. If you agree, 49A voters, I ask for your support on Tuesday, November 8th, or sooner. September 23rd is when early voting starts, early absentee voting. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to Representative Candidate Connect, 49B.
Thank you. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for putting this on tonight. Thank you for all the other candidates. My name is Thomas Connect, and I'm running for state representative in 49B. A bit about me, I grew up on a small farm, and my dad had a concrete foundation company. So when I was young, he was a bit old school. If you could walk, you could work. So I realized if I didn't want to get my rear end chewed up by the old man my whole life, I better go to school. So I was the first person in my family to go to college. I did all right, ended up going to get my master's in law school. I was practicing law on the East Coast. I met a girl at the airport. We fell in love, and I followed her to Minnesota. So I fell in love with a girl and then fell in love with Minnesota. And now that I'm here, I grew up on a farm, played hockey my whole life, and I'm Swedish and German. So if I don't fit into Minnesota with that background, I won't fit in anywhere. So I lived in Minnesota about over 3 years, going on 3 years now, in Eden Prairie for a little over a year. And I'm running, more than anything to reduce the partisan divide. There's too much polarization in our state and in our country, and I'm trying to bridge that. On the issue front, I'm going to prioritize public safety, cut living costs, and ensuring educational excellence. And I'm going to be a hardworking, independent voice for Eden Prairie, and I'd be honored to earn your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to Representative Candidate 49B, Kataza Watun.
Hello, everyone. Thanks to League for hosting tonight and for your outstanding commitment to democracy in these turbulent and challenging times. I am State Representative Carly Katiza Watun, and I was first elected to the Minnesota House of Representatives in 2018, and I'm running for re-election in District 49B. My husband and I are longtime residents of Eden Prairie. We first moved here right after we graduated from St. Thomas, and it didn't take long to realize that this is where we wanted to build our family, build our life, and raise our family. So fast forward a decade or so, and we've been doing just that. We have 4 beautiful children, and they attend our Eden Prairie Public Schools and community education classes. I serve on not 1, not 2, but 3 PTOs across the city. We live, work, and play in Eden Prairie, and it's a dream come true to be a part of this community. It's a joy and an honor to represent Eden Prairie at the Capitol. My background isn't in politics, it's in business. I have experience working in a small business environment and working alongside consultants in global organizations. I know what it takes to put aside differences and get the job done. And now, more than ever, we need people at the table who know what life is like outside the Capitol. As a millennial, I worry that some of the policies being enacted or dismantled across the country now are taking us backward instead of focusing on our future. We must invest more in public education and technical training programs so Minnesotans can enter the workforce ready to achieve their dreams. We must ensure that people have equal access to affordable health care, no matter their age, race, gender, or pre-existing conditions. We need to take seriously the threats against our planet and take action now. As a mom, I know what Eden Prairie families are going through, keeping our children safe in school, making ends meet on the family budget, and securing high quality and affordable childcare. I'm grateful to be here tonight to discuss our shared vision for the future of Eden Prairie and our great state of Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Now we're going to start with our questions. We're going to start with you, Senate candidate Helseth, with question number 1. Please state how long you have lived in this Senate district and what your community involvement has been during this time.
How long I've lived in this district in 49?
Correct.
I have lived in this district for 10 years. This will be we're going on my 11th year. No, I didn't live, I haven't lived in the district for 20 years. I've been in Minnetonka for 10 and Eden Prairie for 10, but only in the district for 10. We lived north of Highway 7.
Okay.
So anyway, in this district, I have loved being involved in, we've done some work with Feed My Starving Children. Me and my kids have done that, and with the school that my kids attend. We have gone to lots of events in the area, for sure. I continually run, I don't think I've missed 1 year of running the Stop the Trafficking run that is held by Purgatory Creek, because that is a concern of mine, that trafficking does happen in Eden Prairie. That was my first question to I think Senator Klobuchar was there at the first race I ran, and police officers, and I went up and asked them when I signed up for the race, is human trafficking actually happening in Eden Prairie? And he said yes, and I was very shocked. So that is something I would love to address if I were in the Senate, and I think it is very important, so thank you.
Thank you. Representative candidate Chase, would you please answer that question?
Sure. We've lived in Eden Prairie for about the last 6 years in this specific district. Prior to that, I lived in 49B for 2 years back in college, like I mentioned before. It's just been a great time. We love our community, love going to the Stop the Trafficking event with great turnouts, and the neighborhood night outs, just really enjoying the trails and the people that are out there, getting to know them. The 4th of July event at Round Lake Park this year was fantastic. The Lions event as well, the corn feed. It's just been a wonderful time, and I really look forward to enjoying it in the future.
Thank you. Representative candidate Pryor, I'll repeat the question just to remind everybody. So please share how long you've lived in the representative district and what your community involvement has been during this time.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. So I did the math, and we've lived in the same house for 28 years, and that house has been in this district for all that time, which is convenient. So my involvement in the district has been, it started with, as you know, I think other people here have talked about, it started with the kids. And so I was a coach of my kids' teams. We did creative problem solving, and it was called Odyssey of the Mind or Destination Imagination. I also did debate. I worked with parents groups. More recently, I've been part of the Eden Prairie Rotary Club, which has been a great civic organization that I've really appreciated. So we've been pretty involved over the years, and certainly it's been an honor and a privilege to be a representative of this district for the last 6 years, because we get great invitations. Come and read to this classroom. Come and attend this League of Women Voters discussion about redistricting. So groups have asked me to come speak to them, and I've been happy to be out and involved in the community that way too. So I guess my advantage of age is that I probably have lived here the longest.
Thank you. Representative candidate Connect.
Yep. So last year, my now fiance started business school, and so I moved. So when she went east for business school, I moved in with a friend down in the district here to save a little money, and I loved it so much I decided to stay. And when she finishes business school, we'll start a family here. And I've been involved in the political space one way or the other for the last 3 years in this area. But while I certainly have lived in Eden Prairie less than any other candidate on the stage, you can say I had the zeal of a convert. and the issues facing our state are far too important to sit in the sidelines with everything going on.
Thank you. Representative candidate Katiza Watun, how long have you lived in this district, and what has your community involvement been?
I also had the opportunity to do the math, and we have lived in Eden Prairie for 11 years and 4 months. We bought our first home back in 2011, right before we got married, and we had no children when we bought that first house, so we were over off of Pioneer Trail right near Pax Christi. During the time that we lived over there and attended Pax Christi, I actually taught CCD classes there, so that was a really wonderful experience and got to have fun with a lot of the kids before we had kids of our own. But because now we have 4 kids, we did need a little bit more space for everyone to find a room to sleep and play and everything like that. So now we live off Eden Prairie Road, and we have been in that neighborhood for just over 3 years.
Thank you. Senate candidate Swedinsky.
Yeah, hi. So we lived in Chanhassen, just across the border, about a mile, for 25 years. And when my wife and I decided to downsize a few years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, 6 years ago, there was no place else to go but Eden Prairie because of my commitment to this community for 31 years that I taught at the high school. And over those 31 years, I came to respect and admire and have so much admiration for the members of the school board and the members of the city council in this community, because during all those years, my students, as part of their assignment from my class, had to attend a civic meeting. And they chose, most like 90% of them came to an Eden Prairie City Council or an Eden Prairie School Board meeting. And so I got those connections over the years. And the thing I'm proudest of, as far as my involvement in Eden Prairie, is every 2 years I worked with the city to have about 30 to 40 of my students sign up to be election judges. And I took so much joy and comfort in knowing that the city of Eden Prairie on election night might be a little bit better well run because of these student election judges. And it was always so cute. I never told them it was a paid position. So when they signed up and actually showed up, they thought it was volunteer, and then to get paid, it was like, oh my God, so didn't tell us about that. And then the thing I'm probably most proud of is I'm still the record holder for the senior class asking me to speak, giving them the final remarks at the commencement ceremony as their faculty speaker.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to question 2, and this will go to you, Representative Candidate Chase, first. What measures can the state legislature introduce to address violent crime and increase quality police recruiting, training, and retention?
Yeah, I think it's all in the policy making, as you said, that we need to get more officers on the street. We need to make an easier path to get officers and people interested in the piece, becoming police officers, and going down that path. We've scared a lot of them away, and it's muddied the water for bringing people into that space. So we need to turn that around, give them the support that organizations like the Minnesota Peace and Police Officer Association, working with those organizations to understand why people have left and change that legislation to support growth in that area. We need to make sure that we are supporting our officers. I know we do in Eden Prairie and Minnetonka and Hopkins. I've heard it from the chief of police that our officers are really well liked and have great communication and relationships with our public, but it's not the same way. We need to work across the state, and I think especially focusing on Minneapolis right now. They've lost a lot of officers. And we've pulled in a lot of state troopers actually down to Minneapolis. So I think we need to try to get that beef back up, get a lot of people in there interested, excited, because it is a wonderful profession and occupation that you can go into.
Thank you. Representative Candidate Pryor, would you answer that question?
Thank you. So this is a question that I've spent a lot of time thinking about ahead of time. Obviously, it's something that we actually were working with for 2 years in the legislature, actually proposing different policies, but also proposing specific funding to address what we know to be what we all value, which is safe communities. So one of the things that I want to say up front too is that this isn't just like one thing that's going to work. We need to do everything. This is an question about what we need to do. So I do want to say that we do need common sense gun violence prevention legislation, which we do not have in Minnesota right now, and we should have. Other states have it, and it's working. So one of them is, we call it extreme risk protection orders. So when we see that there is somebody that is known to be a danger to themselves or others, that there is a court process, a procedure that we can go through to get these weapons out of the hands of people that should not have them. Florida is a state that has it. It's a policy that's worked. We also have the closing the loopholes on purchasing firearms. There are loopholes, and there are people purchasing firearms, dangerous weapons, that should not have them. So these are two policies that will work, but there's more that we need to do.
Thank you. Representative Candidate Connect, what measures can the state legislator introduce to address violent crime and increase quality police recruiting, training, and retention?
No, absolutely. It's a serious issue. And over the last 4 years, murders are up 42%, violent assaults are up 32%. We need to get a handle on it. And that starts with supporting and funding the police. It's no secret to everyone in this room that the defund the police movement was championed by far left and DFL politicians, and that's emboldened criminals to act out and cause harm in our communities. We need to push back against that rhetoric that villainizes police and makes it harder for communities to recruit and retain officers. In addition, we do need violent intervention programs. Where else? Finally, we also need to prosecute gun crime. 40% of criminals who commit gun crimes get under the mandatory minimum. We need to prosecute. We also need to go after repeat offenders. A lot of the gun crime on the streets, especially in the Twin Cities, is committed by repeat offenders, and we need to hold them accountable. So between supporting and funding the police, pushing back against the harmful narratives that villainize the police, narratives that were championed by the DFL, and holding repeat offenders accountable, there's a lot we can do to address the violent crime plaguing our community.
Thank you. Representative Candidate Katiza Watun.
So first off, look at, I trapped myself. I want to start off and say that white, black, brown, or indigenous, all our neighbors deserve to feel safe and protected in our community. We're blessed here in Eden Prairie to have a great police department filled with strong and principled professionals who serve our community with decency and integrity. But Minnesota isn't the only state seeing an alarming and unacceptable rise in violent crime, and we must act urgently to reverse it. As a mom to biracial children, I'm particularly worried about the increase in hate crimes that we're seeing across the state. You don't have to look farther than Minneapolis to see the attack on one of our mosques just over this past weekend. And when we talk about safety, we need to talk about safety for everyone in our community. As your state representative, I have worked to make prudent financial investments in good law enforcement and first responder resources, and advance common sense policies to hold law enforcement accountable for misconduct and strengthen community trust. These goals are not mutually exclusive, and we must do both. So that being said, getting down to the brass tacks and specifics, this year I introduced a $1.7 million proposal for automobile theft prevention programs, and it was funded at just about $600,000. I co-authored the Hometown Heroes Assistance Act for the most comprehensive aid program for firefighters in the nation, and I've worked closely with the Eden Prairie Police Department. My opponent likes to tie me to far-left politicians. I do not support defunding the police. Thank you.
Thank you. Senate candidate Swedinsky, could you answer that?
Yes, so everyone's clear in the audience and at home, no one up here wants to defund the police. None of us ever once stated we wanted to defund the police. My 4-year-old grandson wants to be a police officer. And I've done nothing to squelch that joy and enthusiasm that he feels as a 4-year-old. At one time, the police officers in this nation, just like our teachers and our nurses, we held them up on a pedestal as noble professions that I would be proud of if my child became one of those three, chose one of those three professions. And for some reason, in the last couple of years, we've knocked those folks off those pedestals that they once belonged on. And the one thing that I'm so perplexed by, when I was a young kid, I remember Lieutenant Calley was somewhat responsible for this, for people spitting on our veterans when they came home from the war in Vietnam. And I feel like the police are, and now everybody feels horrible about that. They just, oh my God, I can't believe I treated veterans for their willingness to serve the way we treated them. And I think we're gonna feel the same way about the police in coming years, when all of a sudden, because of one man, not Lieutenant Calley, but Derek Chauvin, and all of a sudden we're starting to spit on our police officers. Shame on us. I think someday, in not too near future, we're gonna revisit what we've gone through the last couple years, and with all the civil unrest, and we're gonna sit down and give a big hug to all the nurses and teachers and police officers and apologize for what we've done to knocking them off that pedestal they once proudly stood on.
Okay. Senate candidate Helseth, what measures can the state legislator introduce to address violent crime and increase quality police recruiting, training, and retention?
I think that is something the legislature should do and can do, so they can fund police departments, give funding to specific police departments for things like recruiting. Also, the funding can go to more community programs. I was at a town hall with Chief Matt Sackett in Eden Prairie, I can't remember when it was, a couple of weeks ago, and I've asked a couple times when I've seen him, what ideas, what things are you doing to get more involved in the community so that the people in our community, and the kids especially, are not afraid of police. That's one way to push back against the narrative that police are bad. And it's not something I'm teaching my kids, and I know none of us up here want to defund the police, so we want to give them back that image that it's honorable to be in the police force. And Chief Sackett said that there are programs that they're doing, especially over the summer, to get out and about. And if you look at their Facebook page, you can see a lot of the things that they're doing in the community. I think that's really important, that they need funding to be able to do that, do those kind of programs. Yeah, and also, 15 seconds, okay. Yeah, I agree with those two things for sure, that we as the legislature should fund police departments so that they can do those things, and so that we don't have another Derek Chauvin, we do need to also focus on reform and better training of police officers as well, especially in Minneapolis.
Thank you. Representative candidate Pryor, what bills could be introduced that address increasing inflation for Minnesota citizens?
Well, when we think about that question, there's a couple ways to answer it. One is the acknowledgement that a lot of this is at the federal level of monetary policy and actions that they're taking at the federal level on inflation, and that is, as a nation in the past and probably most effectively, is where we're addressing issues of inflation. I think at the state level, what we have to look at is who's most impacted by inflation, and to make sure that our safety net is in place. So I've talked to seniors, and they're worried about, well, they're worried about the cost of medications. They're worried about the food and what the prices are at the grocery store and how that comes out of their limited paycheck or Social Security check. So we need to make sure that the safety net that we have in place is strong, that we're not missing anyone, particularly not missing young kids or seniors that are most vulnerable. So I think these are the things that we in the state legislature will be looking at as we think about inflation.
Thank you. Representative candidate Connect, could you answer that, please?
Yeah, I take a different approach. I take the spirit of FDR. When there's times of economic turmoil, you got to do everything you can to help people. There's plenty we can do. Number one, for cutting living costs, that's reducing the tax burden for Minnesotans. We have a $9.3 billion budget surplus, yet we're still one of the highest tax states in the country. Providing long-term tax relief will help cut living costs for hardworking Minnesotans. Two is addressing the labor shortage. As everybody knows, when you go out on a daily basis, a lot of places are struggling to stay open because they don't have enough workers. We need to get more people back to work. Right now, the workforce participation rate is still pre-COVID levels, so we can help get people back to work. But also, we need to provide help. Hey, talk to business owners and see what they need to get more people to work. Finally, is frankly government spending. The Federal Reserve has come out with a study saying both state and federal spending contributed to the inflation in this country. Yet this past spring, the House DFL wanted $7 billion in new spending that would fuel the flames of inflation. We should not do that. At its core, inflation is too much money chasing too few goods and services. So we shouldn't increase spending, which would only dramatically increase the runaway inflation, which are at 41-year highs. Thank you.
Okay, Representative Katiza Watun, what bills could be introduced that address increased inflation for Minnesota citizens?
As a mom to 4 kids, I know just how expensive it is to feed your family these days. 3 of my kids just went back to school yesterday, and school costs have gone up, so backpacks, school supplies, all these things. And one of the things that I had the opportunity to do last week was put together school supplies for families in need, so children who weren't able to afford school supplies. And I worked with the PTO to put together that. It's a program with people reaching out to people and other organizations in the community to make sure that we support our neighbors in need. And Eden Prairie residents have been amazing at doing just that. At the legislature, there are certain things, levers that we can press, release, et cetera. And one of those, knowing just how much childcare costs these days, I had proposed an increase in our childcare tax credit. And so this was actually included in the final agreed upon tax bill that should have gotten past the finish line this year, but unfortunately Republicans walked away from the negotiating table. So that would have put money back in the hands of families, parents of young children, to help them afford housing, not only, childcare, as well as food, and a little bit of fun, because we know after the past few years that we've lived through, a movie night on a Friday night, a special pizza with your family, those things are going to make memories with your kids, and that's what they're going to remember growing up. So I appreciate the question, and I know just how hard it is these days.
Thank you. Senate Candidate Swedinsky.
Yeah, thanks. The Federal Reserve sets monetary policy. It is much more of a federal issue than it is a state issue, even though I do appreciate the question, obviously. But if I remember one thing from econ in college, it was low unemployment equals high inflation. And right now, Minnesota has the lowest unemployment rate of any state in U.S. history. Minnesota has the lowest unemployment rate of any state in U.S. history. So clearly, Econ 101 would suggest a ramification of that, a result of that is we're going to have high inflation, which no one wants, but we all appreciate that everybody's got a job. And so it's just one of the consequences, if you will, of low unemployment rates. But there are things we can do, getting back to the question, and clearly giving assistance to people on fixed incomes. The people that my heart breaks for right now under the current inflation increases is retirees on that home that they bought in the 1950s and 60s, raised their family in those homes, paid property taxes in those homes, and now they're sitting on their fixed Social Security income, and because of the price of everything, including property taxes, they are just struggling, and those people need our assistance through this.
Senate Candidate Helseth, what bills could be introduced that address increasing inflation for Minnesota citizens?
I don't think there's going to be one bill that will address inflation directly. I do think it would help if we use some of the surplus to create permanent tax cuts so that individuals, Minnesotans, have more money, more of their own money, rather than having to pay so many high prices. Inflation is obviously something that affects us all, especially with kids going back to school. So I think it can be addressed through bills that cut taxes, cut them permanently. We could also probably address inflation through lowering or getting rid of our tax on Social Security. That might not be an immediate fix, but using the surplus that we have, not just for creating more spending, which would increase inflation, but giving cuts and getting rid of Social Security tax and making sure families have more of their own money, I think are two ideas.
Thank you. Representative Candidate Chase.
So I think there's two areas that I'd probably focus on, similar to Marla. I think I'd look at the surplus first. Being the 5th or 6th highest tax state in the country, it doesn't take much to get down to kind of the middle of the pack. We're competing with New York and California, but we're Minnesota. We've got it nice here. We've got a great state. We should not be at the top of the charts with taxation. Business tax, personal tax, $9 billion goes a long way. So I'm not saying permanent tax cuts with the entire $9 billion. But there is some movement there to get back to reality where people should be, to put money back in their pockets. The next thing I would say too is that with that unemployment number of 1.8%, we are still missing 70,000 people from the workforce that were there in 2019. That's also driving the unemployment number down because those people haven't come back, which is actually driving inflation as well. And we saw this, my 15 years in finance and accounting, the accounting manager, myself, the controller last year, we were talking about inflation is coming. We knew it was coming. And we should have done something about it a year ago, but now is the opportunity to cut spending to what we should prioritize and try to get people back to work, because that's the easiest way to right-size this problem.
Thank you. Moving on, what steps should lawmakers make to expedite judiciously large surpluses in Minnesota's budget? We'll start with Representative Candidate Connect.
Can you repeat that one more time? Sorry.
Yes. What steps should lawmakers make to expedite judiciously large surpluses in Minnesota's budget?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just to kind of build on what I was saying earlier, Minnesota is one of the highest tax states in the country. We can reduce our tax burden in a fiscally prudent way while have plenty of money to fund government services in the rainy day fund. So on that end, I just kind of looking at that. So I would start there, and given the inflationary environment, kind of, hey, let's pause for the time being at least until inflation comes down, additional government spending, and let's reduce the tax burden in a fiscally prudent way. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Candidate Katiza Watun.
Can you please repeat the question?
Yes. What steps should lawmakers make to expedite judiciously large surpluses in Minnesota's budget?
So coming out of the first global pandemic in over 100 years, we do have a surplus, which is a better situation to be in than facing a deficit, to be honest. We were in a completely different set of circumstances just 2 years ago, facing the start of the pandemic and really worrying about where we were going to go from here. So the Minnesota Legislature really acted expeditiously and made sure that our businesses had what they need to weather the storm. We invested in childcare businesses to make sure that they could stay open to take care of kids during the pandemic, to the tune of $30 million of investments in our childcare providers. And I think that we still aren't back to where we were in funding our public schools. So when we look at this surplus and we know that our public schools, money was taken away from our public schools back in the years of Governor Pawlenty, we're still not back to that. So I think that we need to look at indexing the investment in our public schools to the rate of inflation so that our schools aren't wondering on a year-to-year basis just how many teachers they're going to have to cut before the next school year. Our kids shouldn't have to spend the summer, or parents of kids shouldn't have to spend the summer thinking about if there's going to be twice as many kids in their classroom, and that's happening all over the state. So I think that we need to look at the investments that we can make in the future of Minnesota, and that is how we are going to move forward and build a brighter Minnesota for everybody.
Thank you. Senate candidate Swedinski.
Thanks. 2 years ago, at the 6 months into the COVID pandemic, we were projected to have a $2 billion deficit, $2 billion deficit. And at the Capitol, we were running around, oh my God, a deficit. And then because of Waltz and the legislature and people like you that contacted us, and because of good management of money, we ended up with a $9 billion surplus. I mean, this was not seen on anybody's radar, $9 billion surplus. And the reason is no one was expecting, all the economists at the state weren't expecting income taxes to be as high as they were, and sales taxes and corporate taxes. And they thought, and state spending actually went down during COVID. So we ended up with this $9 billion surplus. And I think we had a great plan in the 11th hour in the last session, that 1/3 of that $9 billion was going to be set aside for a rainy day fund. 1/3 of that $9 billion was going to be invested back in the state in infrastructure, mental health spending, education, and the final 1/3, so $3 billion each, the other $3 billion was going to be returned to the taxpayers, returned to the people. And the biggest plan was for it to be to get rid of the Social Security tax. All that fell apart at the 11th hour.
Senate candidate Helseth, what steps should lawmakers make to expedite judiciously large surpluses in Minnesota's budget?
I would love to see us use this surplus and future surpluses for education. We need to change how we're doing education. I'm not saying we should not fund education. I think we should, but I think some of the surplus should go to funding education and, in addition, creating funding so that we can do something similar to what Arizona has done, which is create education savings accounts for each student. So Arizona has done it where they have every student in the state gets about $6,000 and it's funding that follows the kids. So the parents can choose whatever school they want to send their kid to. And there was, in this particular bill, $500 million for public schools. So it will create kind of a competition. It will raise up the standard at public schools, and it will probably create additional charter schools. It'll be funding private schools. I think it will help our education tremendously to put money toward that. Also, tax cuts like we've mentioned. I do think businesses, small businesses could use more tax relief from what I've been reading and what I understand. And I would love for us in Minnesota to use the surplus in order to make us more competitive so that businesses come here and stay and grow and prosper.
Representative candidate Chase.
Can you repeat it one more time, please?
Yes. What steps should lawmakers make to expedite judiciously large surpluses in Minnesota's budget?
Yeah, I think I mentioned it before, but I think the tax cuts is a big thing. We do want to become seen as a friendly state for the Fortune 500 to come in. I don't know how many years, I think it's 30 or 40 years since we've had a Fortune 500 company come to the state. We're just not that friendly to businesses, and especially with the mandates and the shutdowns, we crushed a lot of small businesses. We need to get back to a business-friendly state, cutting the taxes for businesses, inspiring them, helping them have a reason to invest in the state, because the cycle will come back to help everybody around. It'll bring people back to the state. It'll bring other businesses to support them back to the state. Being a tax-friendly state is just good for business, and it's ultimately good for the taxpayers as well. So we need to energize our businesses to invest in the state, help them to have reasons to build and grow their businesses, again, to bring those 70,000 people back to the state workforce, because the inflation's not done yet. And recession concerns, we need to get people working. We need to get them to be able to pay their bills, so that they have a higher quality of life and can enjoy being part of the workforce again.
Thank you. Representative candidate Pryor.
Thank you. So I'm going to repeat some of the things that you've heard from Representative Katiza-Watun and from Senator Swedzinski. I think what we have to do is we have to look at that balanced approach for what we looked at when we had the surplus. And one of the things underlying that is you have to understand the nature of the surplus. Is it a short-term surplus where it only exists in this budget year but will not be in the future? Because if you give a long-term tax cut, then what you've got done is create deficits in the future. On the other hand, if you increase spending and you only have if you increase long-term spending when you only have short-term money, then again, you're going to run a deficit in the future. So fiscally, what we have to look at is that balanced approach to it. So the bills that I would have gladly voted for at the end of session, some of it set aside money for the rainy day fund. Some of it was tax cuts, including eliminating taxes on Social Security. I would have voted for that bill. I hope that's a yes or no question later on, too. It was a great tax bill. It also helped renters. Renters is a group that's being taxed unfairly right now and disproportionately to their income. And then finally, there are real needs in our state. And we had an opportunity for programs that would have improved lives now into the future. I think our budget surplus was some of it was a permanent budget surplus, and we could have made permanent solutions.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to question number 5. This is going to first go to you, Representative Candidate Katiza-Watun. How would you address the DNR's stated need for increased funding for water and erosion management in reaction to climate change?
Minnesotans care deeply about our state and the natural resources, the beauty of our state. If folks want to make investments, particularly in ensuring that we have clean water to drink and clean air to breathe, not just for us now, but for generations of Minnesotans to come. And so I think that as we consider the money that we have on hand and the investments that we can make to improve the way that we're reacting to climate change, I think that there are urgent considerations, and such that we need to be investing in renewable energy sources. We need to be supporting and educating Minnesotans so that they can make responsible and climate-friendly decisions at their home, whether that's community solar gardens, whether that is investing in personal solar panels, whether that is increasing our investment in electric vehicle charging stations across the state so that people can have an easier time making that transition away from a traditional gas-powered vehicle. And there's so much more to consider, but I know that particularly here in Minnesota, that this is something that we are already facing. We're one of the fastest warming states, and if we don't do something now to address it, soon we're gonna have to say goodbye to our state bird. And that's a really, really sad thought.
Thank you. Senate Candidate Swedzinski.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Climate change is real, it's here. I'm just looking at the news this summer with what the droughts in Lake Mead, in the Southwest, and the water shortages, and we've got to deal with this. And I have full faith in the DNR. They're scientists. They believe in climate change, and it's on the agenda. About 23 years ago, we in Minnesota passed the Legacy Amendment, which, 3/8 of 1 cent goes for the Legacy Amendment. And 1/3 of that money goes for water quality standards and getting our wastewater treatment facilities up to speed and making sure that our fish and our state bird, the loon, and our state fish, the walleye, I think it's the walleye, sorry. Thank you. And making sure that our children don't have to go to Canada to find out what the state bird sounds like. And so I believe in science. I believe in the DNR. I know that the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, of all the agencies in the state, has the lowest turnover rate of any other agency, because they're all in it together to try to leave this world a better place than they found it. And right now, all of us that maybe of a certain age, and back in the 70s when we couldn't swim in the water and we couldn't, the water coming out of our taps, like in Jackson, Mississippi, wasn't drinkable. This is real, and we've got to get behind our scientists and figure this out.
Thank you. Senate candidate Helseth, how would you address the DNR's stated need for increased funding for water and erosion management in reaction to climate change?
I would agree that they do need funding to take care of water and erosion management. So I'm not opposed at all to, this is a pretty easy question, I'm not opposed at all to taking care of our areas, especially in our beautiful state. I've lived here since I was 10 years old, and I still have yet to go and see the boundary waters. That's probably going to go against me very badly, but my kids have been there, and my husband has been there, and they tell me it's really very, very beautiful and is a big draw for our state. But all around the state. I was just in Bemidji for a wedding, and I'd never been to Bemidji before. It's absolutely beautiful. I've never seen the lake until last weekend. So yes, I think funding for water and erosion to stop that is great. I don't know if it's, I don't know how much money that they're asking for, but I think it's a good thing. I don't know if it's my number one priority. I think we need to focus really on education, but it is in the top 3 to 5.
Thank you. Representative candidate Chase.
Yeah, I think that the water that we have in Minnesota, it's amazing if you go down to the confluence of the St. Croix River and the Mississippi. There's a very distinct line, and so I think a lot of that fertilizer that's coming out of the farms, and there's a lot of work that's been done. We know that that's happening, and the water quality is getting better, but I think there is still a need for that. I had the opportunity to go down the Mississippi down to St. Louis, and it just gets worse and worse and worse, and we really need to improve it around here. Work proactively with farmers, with water companies that are processing water, to make sure that we are not harming it at the source, right? Itasca is beautiful, and we need to make sure that the water that we see up there is similar to what's leaving the state. As far as the DNR, I agree, Senator Swedzinski, that we do have a great group at the DNR. I would just like to see, what are they going to spend it on? What are these projects that they're putting it toward? If they're going to call it erosion, let's make sure that it is actually fixing the erosion issues. If it's water quality, where is it? Is it the Minnesota River? Is it the Mississippi? Is it the Minnehaha Creek? Is it coming out of Lake Minnetonka? There's a lot of different places that money can go, and I would just like to see, if we're going to fund it, what is it actually going to fix?
Representative candidate Pryor.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to start by saying I do have 7 grandkids, and the youngest is 3 right now. And I know, I can imagine 60 years from now, maybe that little guy is maybe a state representative, and they'll be dealing with the issues that we didn't deal with. And I want to be able to think into that future. And when they say, they call me Nana. Okay, Nana, you were there. Did you care? Did you try to act? And I want the answer, and I know the answer will be yes. So when we're talking about, it sounds like, erosion, water quality, these are things we can fix. No, these are profound challenges in this state and in this country and on this planet. Right now, we've been talking about, they'll talk about this is the 100-year flood, like a flood that would happen only once every 100 years. But these 100-year floods are happening every 10 years. And they've had to change the terminology. We don't talk about 100-year floods. We say, this is something you wouldn't expect to happen in 1,000 years. And you can imagine, as this planet keeps warming up, that these figures will keep going up and up and up. They'll say, this shouldn't have happened for 10,000 years, but it happened 2 times in a row. So these are the issues that we're dealing with. The erosion, how we have to prepare for it, how we need our experts to lead for us. I am in full support.
Representative candidate Connect, how would you address the DNR's stated need for increased funding for water and erosion management in reaction to climate change?
No, absolutely. I would work with the DNR, and we can divert funds from other areas to make sure that they have the resources they need to address the erosion that's going on in the state. But more than that, we also need to work with the agricultural sector to make sure that they adopt best practices and use modern technology to minimize any runoff and erosion that's happening. Additionally, we also need to do more than that. We need to, in addition to clean waterways and agricultural practices, we need to protect open spaces, maximize biodiversity, and yes, reduce emissions. And as a state, I'm in favor of carrots, not sticks. So meaning we should incentivize innovation and clean technology to making sure that we reduce carbon emissions. But we also, at the state level too, we should look at and reward best practices in manufacturing and construction projects, which are often an overlooked sector for carbon emissions, not only in the state, but the country and on an international level. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. What steps can Minnesota take to narrow the achievement gap between white and BIPOC students and the learning loss for all students due to COVID-19? Senate candidate Swedinsky.
Yeah, thanks. It's a very important question. And so 2 years ago, when we were faced with civil strife and economic unrest and all the things we were going through, that session, I set one goal, one thing. If we could do one thing to change the achievement gap or the opportunity gap or the vulnerability gap, whatever you want to call it, if there was one thing we could do, we need to get more teachers of color into our classrooms. That was my goal in that session 2 years, or this last 2 years. And so we ended up passing a myriad of different bills, grow your own bills, and all these different things to get more teachers of color into our classrooms. 40 to 50% of our students are students of color. 3% of our teachers are Black men. 3% are Black men, even though closing in on 50% of our students. And I can't imagine me going through K-12 and never seeing anybody that looked like me. And so I don't even remember what the question was, frankly, but I think I'm on the right track. And so, am I? I don't want to give up my minute and 30 seconds or 15 seconds. But I think that'd be the one thing that we can do to get rid of the achievement gap. If there's one thing, it's that helping schools hire teachers of color.
Thank you. Senate candidate Helseth.
Can you repeat the question?
I sure can. What steps can Minnesota take to narrow the achievement gap between white and BIPOC students and the learning loss of all students due to COVID-19?
Well, this isn't a direct result of COVID-19 or the learning loss, but I think one step we can take is to break the stronghold of the teacher union. I think we need to expand the options for kids and how they learn. I think we are going down the wrong road by focusing so much on race and on the race of the teachers or the students, because the focus on race is not educating them. And we're going backwards, and it's being made worse by a teacher union that creates a contract where underrepresented teachers, namely teachers of color, are not released or not fired before non-represented teachers are fired. So the new Minneapolis school teacher contract lets go of white teachers who may have seniority before it will fire a teacher of color. And that's wrong. It's not right. And it's also putting the focus in the wrong place. This is why we have such a low proficiency in math and reading, and it needs to change.
Representative candidate Chase, same question.
Yeah, I think similar to the public safety issue that we have, we need to bring teachers back and get them excited. I know a lot of industries have taken a hit from the mandates and the requirements, and you've got to do this or you got to think that way. It's become very toxic. And when teachers are told that they have to teach a very specific way that isn't even helping the students learn to read or write better, learn math skills any better, we're getting them distracted from what really matters, which is to learn. As far as the achievement gap, I think that goes across the board. I think if we're going to have a better education system, I do agree that we do need to have some more choices. Maybe it means some more charter schools that are more specific to the different communities. I know we have about eight charter schools, I think, that are opening this year, 6 next year. I think that's a great path. I think a voucher system potentially to help students that can go to private schools that may teach them a different way or help them learn a different way would also be very helpful. And school choice is a huge thing to close that gap. Now, as far as learning loss, I think that's what I'm really interested in, hearing a lot of ideas from the public, because that is very personal. Kids miss a lot of time in the classroom, and I think we need to find out, do we need to extend it for the next couple of years? Do we need to figure out if we hold kids back? That seems to be the big question right now as to how do we make up for the lost time that we've seen over the last 2 years?
Thank you. Representative candidate Pryor,
And I'm going to ask you to repeat the question.
what steps can Minnesota take to narrow the achievement gap between white and BIPOC students and the learning loss of all students due to COVID-19?
Okay, so I was listening to Senator Swedzinski, and he ended up saying, what one step would you do? But now that I hear the question again, she did say steps. So I will include what Senator Swedzinski very eloquently talked about, which is, when we listen to students, they keep saying, we need somebody in the classroom that reflects us, that looks like us, so that we know that we belong here and that we feel included in it. So that is one step. I think also we have to look at how to prevent these gaps from happening in the first place. And then with Representative Katiza-Watum, what we're going to talk about is early childhood and the importance of early childhood education. It begins at birth. Those first relationships are forming a child's brain. And if a child isn't getting these nurturing experiences, they don't have these relationships to build on, they're losing out, and they come into school not ready to learn. And to catch them up is a challenge that actually no school district in the country has been able to achieve. So that's another step. The other thing about specifically to the learning loss that we've had through COVID, we know it's simple, it's time in the classroom. We need to make sure that kids have that access to additional help that they need for whatever they lost. Some kids did okay, but some kids didn't. We need to recognize the ones that fell behind and make sure that they get a shot.
Representative candidate Connect.
No, thank you. I think I speak for everyone here. We could probably spend 2 hours on this subject, and it's important enough to do that. So I'll do my best in the 2 minutes I have. My mom cleaned houses when I was young, and she stayed home for about a decade. When I was in high school, she went back to work as a cook at either a deli or a local school to help pay for college. My dad works in construction. I was the first person in my family to go to college, and as you may imagine, based on my background, education is very near and dear to my heart, and we need to ensure educational excellence for our students. Now, the disparity in educational outcomes between white and BIPOC students in Minnesota pre-existed the COVID. We have the greatest disparity of any state in the nation, and it needs to be addressed. For me, that could be, frankly, I would probably be in favor of increasing teacher salary. We could reduce the legislator's salary and give it to the teachers if it was up for me. I don't think I would get my colleagues to sign on to that if I were elected, but we could start there. In addition, we also need to look at classroom ratios, trying to make sure that, hey, we optimize the student to classroom ratio and making sure that classrooms aren't aren't too many students in the classroom. Early childhood education is certainly important. We also need focusing on reading methods and methodology that maximizes students and how they learn and what's best, and put the students first, not any special interest. Thank you.
Okay. Representative candidate Katiza-Watum.
How we address learning loss and the opportunity gap between white and our BIPOC students is something that education professionals and the legislature have been battling for years. So in addition to what everyone else said tonight, yes, it hasn't just come to the forefront. We do have some of the worst opportunity gaps in the nation. And I think COVID exacerbated so many problems that our community is facing, our state is facing, the world is facing. And so when we talk about, as Representative Pryor mentioned, and I was able to serve on the Early Childhood Committee under her as vice chair, and she able to serve on the committee under me as vice chair in the last 4 years. We've done some really important work. We know, and study after study shows, that the single best return on investment that we can make as a state is in early childhood education. Because right now, we spend next to nothing at the state level and at the federal level. Marginal, at best, investment in our children until they turn 5 and are eligible to enter kindergarten. So that is what we need to look at. We need to make these investments when the children are forming all these brain connections. We need to support people as they become parents. Nobody knows how to be a parent until you become one. My 3 older children are adopted out of the foster care system. And so when children are going through early childhood trauma, compared to some of the children who are able to stay in a safe and healthy environment with their biological family for their entire life, we see that learning loss. We see the benefit of early intervention, and we need to make adjustments as necessary.
Okay, thank you. Senate candidate Helseth, would you vote to institute gun regulation similar to the legislation we have regarding our automobiles? Please state clearly yes or no, then explain your answer in 1 minute.
Can I ask you to say it one more time?
Yes. Would you institute gun regulation similar to the legislation we have regarding our automobiles? Please state clearly yes or no, then explain your answer in 1 minute.
So every legislation about a car would apply to gun control? Is that, I guess I can't ask that, can I?
I think I'm going to ask Jennifer to come up here and address that.
Okay. So all the legislations we have for cars would apply to, no.
I think licensing
I see.
and I think some of those general concepts that, you have to have insurance if you have a car, you have to have a license to drive a car, you have to, take tests to drive your car. Is that correct, Jennifer? Does that make sense? I didn't write the question.
And so,
We're supposed to answer with a yes or a no.
Start with the yes or no is the.
Start with the yes or no, and then you can explain your answer in 1 minute.
No, I would say no, yes. And can I explain?
Yes,
Okay,
please.
sorry.
Please do.
I forgot the rules. Okay, so I would say no because before I vote yes or no on anything, I would want to know exactly what I'm voting for. So I agree and really strongly support the fact that whoever buys a gun, a handgun or whatever, they need to go through certain protocols and have a background check and have a license or a permit for that weapon. So there should definitely be some rules and regulations on when and how you purchase a gun, and who purchases it, if you have a record or that sort of thing. But I don't support adding on legislation to purchase guns.
Thank you. Representative candidate Chase.
No. I think this is difficult for us to think through because we've never heard of anything like this before, considering a car and a gun similar. Yes, there is training on both fortunately, for background checks we have for gun sales. Yes, and I think you will be hearing shortly that there are a lot of loopholes around that, and that theoretically this could fix that, but to re-register the millions of guns that we have out there every single day and create an organization that tracks every single one of them, that's not the problem today. The problem today is we have people that have bad intentions, that misuse them, and are using these weapons for the wrong use, not hunting, not protection. And so tracking guns and cars similarly, I think, is a very strange concept, actually.
Representative Candidate Pryor.
Yes. And it is interesting. I've had a number of people, constituents, when I'm talking to people, they talk about, you know, if I want to buy a car, I have to do this and this and this. But they said, you know, why don't we have those same kinds of regulations and requirements for firearm owners? And I think the important comparison here is that having a firearm and operating a car and owning a car is a responsibility. And it's something that, you know, it's a freedom that we have to make these choices and to have these things and do these, take these actions. But with that freedom comes a great responsibility. And so the comparison between the car and firearms, I think, is a good one. And it means that we need to, we do need to make sure that the people that have these weapons, firearms, that we also know that these are people that are responsible for using them.
Representative Candidate Connect, would you vote to initiate gun regulations similar to the legislation we have regarding our automobiles? Please state clearly yes or no, and then explain your answer in 1 minute.
Yeah, but I would say no, because right now in the state of Minnesota, you generally have to be 18 to use a gun. And if you're under that age, you have to do so under the supervision of an adult. If we adopt the car standard, that means 15 to 16-year-olds can use and operate a gun without the proper licensing requirements, and I don't think we should be doing that. Outside of that, we need to address gun violence in this country and in this state. We need an all the above approach to do that. And obviously, the left, you know, always likes to say gun regulations. The right often uses the term mental health, which I find sometimes quite amorphous. When I take a step back and look at this issue, gun violence is usually perpetrated by men, and whether it be the school shootings or the urban violence, it's usually perpetrated by young men. As a society and a culture, we need to do a much better job of figuring out what's causing young men to cause harm, to pick up a gun and cause harm in our communities. And I plan on doing that if elected to the state legislature. Thank you.
Representative Candidate Katiza Watun.
Yes. I think my fellow panelists are taking this question a little bit too literally. So I know that we had a little bit of explanation earlier on. And so it's similar, not exactly the same. And I think that, as Representative Pryor mentioned, you know, making sure that people have training, making sure that, you know, I mean, insurance. Constituents have brought up to me the possibility of requiring gun insurance, like the way that we have car insurance. And so there's not a black and white proposal for this right now sitting in the Minnesota legislature that I'm aware of. But, you know, it's something that merits consideration. My husband and I are safe and responsible gun owners. I ran for office initially as a mom demanding action. Minnesotans know that with rights come responsibilities. And with deference to our Second Amendment rights, all options should be on the table for consideration by community members, law enforcement, and the legislature as we look to stem the tide of gun violence.
Senate Candidate Swedinsky.
Yes, the Second Amendment begins with the words, a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be denied. A well-regulated militia. And when Kitty was explaining what she thought the writer of the question, the three examples she gave were licensing, insurance, and a test. And that's what a well-regulated means, is that it's okay No one's Second Amendment rights will be infringed upon by requiring regulation of the industry. And for all the people that I would ever meet that would answer no to that question, I challenge you to walk into a classroom on a day and announce to those 30 kids that we had another Red Lake today, or we had another Sandy Hook today, or we had another Columbine today, and watch those kids' faces and tell me that we do not need reasonable, rational regulation of our firearms industry.
Thank you. Moving on, this is going to go to Representative Candidate Chase. Would you vote to restrict abortion in any way in Minnesota? Please state clearly yes or no, then explain your answer in 1 minute.
No, and my reasoning for that is that I truly don't believe we have any way of doing that. There is no legislation that can do that. And so while I do believe in life, every life is truly a life, I don't believe there is any legislation that we could vote on in this election season, that there's a reason that this question is even brought up. I know we keep having concerns that we're going to be an island surrounded by pro-life states. That's the term that's thrown out there. The reality is this is not an election issue right now. I do believe I am pro-life, and I do believe in life that starts at conception, but I don't believe there is any legislation that could be voted on.
Representative Candidate Pryor.
Please repeat the question.
Would you vote to restrict abortion in any way in Minnesota? Please state clearly yes or no, then explain your answer in 1 minute.
It's like, you don't want to get that part wrong. So, no, I would not vote for legislation to restrict abortion in Minnesota. And in fact, I don't think that that's what the question is right now. So we had a Supreme Court ruling, a Minnesota Supreme Court ruling that said our Constitution was, it would be inconsistent to outlaw abortion according to our Minnesota Constitution. So that was one Minnesota Supreme Court made that ruling. Well, think about what happened in the US. There was a Supreme Court ruling, Roe v. Wade, that said abortion should be legal in the United States of America. And we had that in place for a number of years. But then a new court came into place and said, oh, no, that ruling doesn't apply anymore. So I think that we should do farther than just not restrict right now, but we need to put these protections into our legislature, into our Constitution.
Representative Candidate Connect.
Yeah, abortion policy should reflect what the majority of Minnesotans
Yes or no,
want.
please.
That's keeping it safe and legal.
Yes or no?
Yes or no, please.
Sorry.
Oh, so please clearly state yes or no, and then explain your answer in 1 minute.
Yeah, so, okay. Sorry. You can repeat it one more time if you want.
Would you vote to restrict abortion in any way in Minnesota? Please state clearly yes or no, then explain your answer in 1 minute.
If this comes up, my abortion, I will vote. We need more nuance in this in the discussion. So it's a word if I would say yes, abortion policy. So I just said yes. Abortion policy should be safe, legal, and we should ensure that there's limits on post-viability procedures. So I would vote yes, we should have limits on post-viability procedures, which reflects what the majority of Minnesotans want, what the majority of doctors in America believe, and past presidents of Planned Parenthood. Thank you.
Representative Candidate Katiza Watun.
No. I would not vote in any way to restrict abortion access in Minnesota. And in fact, like Representative Pryor said, I believe that we should codify our access to reproductive rights and abortion access in the Minnesota State Constitution. We are an island. of reproductive rights access in the Midwest now. Every year that I've been in the legislature, my GOP colleagues have introduced anti-choice legislation, banning abortion at heartbeat, banning abortion flat out. It's unbelievable. And for anything less than a wholehearted support of abortion access to contraception, and for women to be able to make their own decisions about their own bodies is completely unacceptable. No one in SD 49, no one in the state of Minnesota should make the mistake that all of our GOP gubernatorial candidates, including Kendall Qualls, whom my opponent worked for as campaign manager in 2020, said that they would ban abortion.
Thank you. Senate candidate Swedinsky.
No. You know, I just want to piggyback off of what Representative Pryor said about the current law is so open to interpretation, and for 52 years or 50 years, we interpreted the 9th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which states something like all powers not delegated nor prohibited by the states are reserved to the people thereof. And so clearly abortion was a guaranteed right under the 9th Amendment, as interpreted by the Berger court. Well, all of a sudden now we have a new court, and it's a different interpretation. And so we need to, as my two peers in the House, Pryor and Cotiza Watun said, we need to codify in the law. So we literally need to put in the Minnesota State Constitution the rights of my mother and my wife and my daughter and my granddaughter, so they don't have to listen to this debate 30, 40 years from now.
Senate candidate Helseth.
Yes, we have a class of people who have no rights and can be legally killed before their birthday. We have a class of people in our country that have no rights and that can be killed before they're born. Yes, I would vote to restrict that we have some kind of limit and restriction on killing unborn children. And I hope other people would too.
Okay. Next question. Do you support removing a Social Security tax for Minnesota seniors? Please state clearly yes or no, then explain your answer in 1 minute. Representative candidate Lori Pryor.
Yes. Yes. And there's not much more that needs to be said. We did have a tax bill, and it was one that we were, very excited. That was what it did. It did eliminate Social Security tax on for our seniors, and I think that's where we need to go as a state, and I think that that's something that we can get done in the next session.
Representative candidate Connect.
Yeah, I think we should. Minnesota is one of 13 states that tax the Social Security benefits, and we can and should change that. There's a lot of talk by the incumbents on this stage, what could have happened, but ultimately didn't happen, and what they didn't get done. And I frankly blame that on the increased polarization and partisanship we see at the state level. Too many folks are too busy on Twitter, and frankly, just what I say on both sides of the aisle, and not doing their job and coming together to address really important concerns like cutting the Social Security tax in Minnesota. So I look forward to working, getting to St. Paul, and working with the DFL, Republican, and everybody to just, hey, let's find common ground, hardworking solutions that we can do to address and solve the most pressing problems facing this state, including cutting the social tax and Social Security benefits.
Representative candidate Cotiza Watun, would you support removing Social Security tax for Minnesota seniors? Please state your answer, yes or no, then explain in 1 minute.
Yes. This is an issue that I've heard about from a number of my constituents, and I'll be honest, it wasn't something that I always supported. And in order to clarify that statement, I want to say that already the vast majority of Minnesota seniors don't pay a dime of income tax on their Social Security income. It's something over like $75,000 of annualized income a year. Then you begin paying tax on your Social Security. But listening to my constituents and learning from the different proposals, knowing just what it means today to be on a fixed income. It is something that I have come to support, and I think it's a great example of the bipartisan work that I have done at the Capitol.
Senate candidate Swedzinski.
Yes, Representative Cotiza Watun, you stole all my ammunition, so thank you for your perfect response to that question. I also was on the fence. The Social Security tax results in $1 billion for every biennium, and it only, as Carly said, it's only the top 45% of income wage earners that pay that tax on their Social Security. So I was kind of on the fence for the last couple of years as this became kind of an issue. But as the power of the constituent, to illustrate, that was the #1 phone call, email, voicemail I got this last session, was on get rid of the Social Security tax. And as if we're gonna listen to our constituents and kind of I see the pros and cons, because if we get rid of the tax, we're gonna lose revenue. But the people spoke, and so clearly I've joined the bandwagon that let's get rid of the Social Security tax, if it's a standalone bill, I might add.
Senate candidate Helseth.
Yes, I would vote to, yes, get rid of the Social Security tax. I just learned recently that not everybody who gets Social Security pays that tax, like Carly was saying, and Senator Swedzinski. So we might actually all agree on something. Yes.
Representative candidate Chase.
Yes, absolutely. Double taxation. I mean, there's just so many reasons why this makes sense to be gone. So keep it short with yes.
Okay. This next question goes to you first, Representative candidate Connect. Do you support legalizing sports betting? Please state clearly yes or no, then explain your answer in 1 minute.
Yeah, I would say yes. I frankly think it's inevitable at this point. So for that reason, let's just get it done and have it be regulated. Gambling in general, though, from an economic standpoint, looking at communities that have high levels of gambling, it's frankly not good for those individual local communities. So I want to make sure that, hey, it's done in a smart way, in a right way. But from a legalization of gambling at this point, the whole country is heading in that direction, and the people want it, and it's popular enough, so we could do so in a highly regulated and intelligent and prudent way. But I just want to make sure there's limit any negative economic and social consequences in local communities there.
Representative candidate Cotiza Watun.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Do you support legalizing sports betting?
Yes. So as the Vice Chair of Commerce Committee, we had a bill come through the committee this year. It was authored by the chair of the Commerce Committee, and we did a ton of work making sure that all the folks who could come to the table were at the table, and that includes, our sovereign indigenous nations who have gambling rights here in the state of Minnesota at this time. It was mental health advocates and addiction professionals and law enforcement. And one of the biggest concerns is that sports betting is happening here in Minnesota already. There's a massive black market. And so not only are we not capturing any potential tax dollars from that amount of revenue, but it's not safe. And so people are placing bets with bookies, and no one knows who those folks are. No one knows what may happen if those people aren't able to pay their debt on that. So yes.
Senate candidate Swedzinski.
Yes, but I'm so sad about all. I wish we had magic dust that everybody would just gamble in moderation. And I wish that was possible for some people, that maybe just $10 once a month on a major sports event is, what harm is there in that? But the harm is with the addiction issue for me, and family members that have lost a lot of their wealth because of gambling addiction. This is real. And so for me, yeah, the answer is yes, but I don't know what the number is, but whatever the profit margin would be in revenue for the state of Minnesota, I would sign any legislation that half of it or a third or whatever the psychiatrists and sociologists and gambling addiction professionals would say, this is how much money we will need if this becomes law to make sure that everybody that runs into the problem of addiction can seek the help they need.
Senate candidate Helseth, do you support legalizing sports betting?
I'm going to say no, even though it is not as harmful, it seems, as addictive gambling that happens in casinos or just people who get addicted to gambling and lose their entire livelihood. I don't know a lot about it, but I think I would vote no. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Thank you.
Representative candidate Chase.
Yes, and I think the reason I go in this direction is that if we can see it and regulate it, we have a better chance of managing it. As you've heard, it is happening already. No matter whether we like it or not, I think most of us are in agreement that it is not good for you. But similar to other initiatives that we've had, whether it's with liquor laws and increasing the age for smoking, if we can at least regulate it, we have a better chance of fighting the problems that come along with it.
Representative candidate Pryor.
Yes. So this is a very real question because it's been before us in the House and in the Senate. It came up a couple years previous, back in 2017 or 2018, it was also a bill that someone was proposing. So I had a constituent write to me and saying, sports betting is going on right now. We should legalize it and regulate it. And I said, yes, I agree with you. And then they gave me the bill, and this was back in 2017, and the bill that they gave was a bad bill. It, very little regulation, lots of profits that were leaving Minnesota, and nothing to do for the addiction of gambling. So that was the bill that I voted against. I think it came to a vote, but the bill that Representative Katiza-Watun heard in Commerce is a bill that I could vote for. It does have a hedge to limit addiction, and it also made sure that we were funneling money from regulating this into treating addiction.
Representative candidate Katiza-Watun, do you support state-run paid family and medical leave program? Please state clearly yes or no.
Yes. Not only do I support it, I'm a co-author. I have been a co-author on both my terms, with my sessions that I've served in the House. We know for a fact that part of the number of people who have left the workforce throughout COVID are disproportionately women, and that is because a lot of caregiving falls on the shoulders of women. That's not only children who might have had to, battle through distance learning challenges during the pandemic, but family members, older family members that fell ill due to COVID or other complications. And so someone being able to take the time that they need to take care of themselves after giving birth, to bond with a child after birth, adoption, or foster placement, being able to take care of a family member who needs ongoing cancer treatment or something of those lines. These proposals allow employees to contribute to that program, and employers can as well.
Thank you. Senate candidate Swedzinski.
Yes, yes, yes. It's the right thing to do. It's the humane thing to do. I just can't imagine a society that after a few days says to a mom and a family and a dad, okay, it's time for you to come back to work. And my wife worked for a company years ago that gave 6 weeks, very progressive at that time, paid family leave. And she talked to the owner, and I don't remember the details, but he agreed to extend the company's policy to doubled it from 3 from, yeah, whatever, from doubled the amount of time for paid sick leave. And I was very proud of my wife, and because of what she did, I would like to have that same opportunity for all newborn parents.
Senate Candidate Helseth.
Yes, yes, I would definitely vote for that. I used to work for a company downtown Minneapolis called Fair Isaac Corporation in the AT&T Tower, and I worked as a head receptionist, and there was a woman who was gone for a maternity leave, and she had her baby, and we all knew about it and saw pictures. But when she came back to work, she was sobbing, and she came up to the front desk and was sobbing. I'll never forget it. This was over 15 years ago, because she didn't want to be at work. She wanted to be home with her baby, and she didn't want to drop the baby off at daycare. So she did not have enough time to be at home with her child, with her husband. And I was just reading here, I would support that because I've talked to Senator Julia Coleman about the paid family leave bill that the Republican Senate has put forward, and I think it's a good thing. It creates, businesses can create their own kind of insurance policy so they have their own ways of, oh, sorry. Yes, I would vote yes.
Representative Candidate Chase, do you support state-run paid family and medical leave?
No. And my reasoning is that I don't believe it should be state-run. Most companies, at least the quality companies out there, have these benefits. And these are wonderful benefits that I've taken advantage of. My wife has taken advantage of twice. They absolutely need to be there, but I don't believe it should be up to the state to manage it. The companies nowadays I've seen over the last decade have only gotten better. And I feel like if we leave it up to the state, we're going to get stuck with one thing, and then it's going to be next to impossible for everybody to agree to improve it. So let the companies, they have the burden, let them give the employees the opportunity to determine if they want time off or if they want fully covered health care or additional education. I believe should be a decision that's up to the employer, and employees should have that opportunity to decide between the different employers instead of leaving it to the states to decide how that is run.
Representative Candidate Pryor.
Yes. So we know right now we have, two systems. One, larger companies that can afford to give a benefit like this, and smaller companies that can't. A state program would make sure that all companies can be a part of this program. It's like unemployment insurance. There was a time we didn't have unemployment insurance and people suffered. Right now, we're without paid family leave, and it is happening over and over and over again. Women are giving birth, and they say, statistically, there's this group of women that after 2 weeks are having to go back to work. And it's because they have to work. They have to get that paycheck. And they know that their job is important, and those employers that they're working for need them. So we need to have a program in the state that works for everyone.
Representative Candidate Connect.
Yeah, no, not state-run. There's a lot we can do to lower childcare costs in Minnesota, and they are too high. Right now, there's a cap on the ratio of child care providers. It's one person for every 4 children. If we increase that to 5, that saves nearly $3,000 a family just by doing that alone. Additionally, we can also, to echo Marla's point about the bill in the Senate, that there's a number of legislation that will help incentivize companies to provide paid family leave, and that's what we should be looking at first before we expand the size of government and further crowd out private sector. Thank you.
Senate Candidate Swedzinski. Should Minnesota raise taxes on the top 1% income earners to fund education and social programs? Please answer yes or no, then explain your answer in 1 minute.
Okay, repeat it, please.
Should Minnesota raise taxes on the top 1% income earners to fund education and social programs?
So 1%, what would that be? How many people? Oh, yes, thank you. 1%, what would that number of people be in Minnesota? And when I think of all the millions of Minnesotans that would benefit from that tax increase, but when I think about it, I just can't imagine calling for a tax increase when we have a $9 billion surplus. So I don't know what to say about this question, even though if we did tax the top 1% and that money went for schools to reduce class size and increase teacher salaries and do all the wonderful things for those children, I would vote for that bill. So.
Senate Candidate Helseth.
No, I am not for taxing the wealthiest 1%. I don't think the taxes actually end up only taxing 1% of the population. And I don't think it's something we need to do right now that with the surplus that we have. I think we already have a lot of taxes in place. We're obviously, like we've said before, we're a very high tax state. Our corporate taxes, our income taxes, estate and death tax, Social Security tax. We have a lot of revenue. We have a lot of opportunities for revenue, so I would vote no.
Excuse me, Representative Candidate Chase. Should Minnesota raise taxes on the top 1% income earners to fund education and social programs?
No, as previously mentioned, we have a surplus, right? And I completely agree that right now that definitely doesn't make sense. Furthermore, targeting one group of people, it's pretty easy to move to another state and take your business elsewhere. We've seen a lot of businesses moving out of California for different reasons, moving to other states that are friendlier to those groups, and I'd hate to see that in Minnesota as well. We need to continue having a balanced budget, right? If we make the cuts, permanent tax cuts, and help the economy along by incentivizing businesses, I think that's a great start. We don't need to continue adding more taxes. Let's simplify the tax code and leave the money in their pockets so that they can spend it where they live here.
Representative Candidate Pryor.
No. I think right now, where we are, we do have the resources for doing what's important in the state. I do want to mention, though, that that's the kind of tax that Minnesota does use, which is progressive taxations. So it's the people that are most able to afford the tax that would be paying it. So by saying 1%, we are talking about if there was a need for a tax increase, I can see, that would be a proposal that would come forward. But right now, we've looked at the state budget. We know where we stand right now on our economy, and I don't see a need to increase a tax.
Representative Candidate Connect. Should Minnesota raise taxes on the top 1% income earners to fund education and social programs?
No, especially not with a $9.3 billion budget surplus. If we wanted to increase funding on education at this time, we could hypothetically do so without increased taxes. Minnesota has, again, one of the highest tax burdens in the country. We can reduce our taxes in a meaningful way, fiscally prudent way, while still having fully funding government, including education, and funding the rainy day fund, and that's what we should do. So,
Representative Candidate Katiza Watun.
Yes, I would support an additional tax on our top 1% of income earners. I'm not certain on whether or not the time frame was intended in this question, whomever asked it, and I think something important to consider, like other panelists have suggested with our surplus at this point in time. But simply put, the top 1% of income earners can afford it. And there's no guarantee that they're going to spend their money here in Minnesota. They could be traveling the world. They could be buying boats. They could be buying houses all across the country or all across the world. And that's their right to do those things. But there are people who are struggling in our community every day who can't even put food on the table or a roof over their head for their children. And so everyone needs to pay their fair share.
Senate Candidate Helseth, would you support the full legalization of cannabis? Please state your answer, yes or no, then explain in 1 minute.
No, because I have done some reading on the effects of cannabis if it's overused and used too addictively. However, I do know it does have medical benefits. When I've been outdoor knocking, I have run into a woman who has fibromyalgia and has a prescription for cannabis that really helps her. So if there's a way it can be used medically without it being just widespread, legally available for anybody and everybody, I would consider that, but I would initially vote no to that.
House Candidate Chase,
Can you repeat, please?
would you support the full legalization of cannabis?
No, I think there's really just too much risk at this point of opening the door wide open. The THC bill that was passed kind of snuck past the Senate. I think that has been seen very visibly as a mistake. And going down that path, I think, will be a very negative outcome for the state.
Representative Candidate Pryor.
Yes. I think this is similar in many ways to the sports betting. There is cannabis use in Minnesota today. It is easily accessible. Our youth find it easily accessible. But it's not regulated. People don't know what they're getting when they're taking cannabis, when they're getting it through different forms. The regulation of cannabis, legalization and regulation of cannabis, I think is going to really it improves the safety of our communities to have it be regulated. It will also let adults make adult choices. And at this point, there's enough research to say that adults, as in people that are older than 25, if you compare alcohol and cannabis, they are very similar substances. And so regulating one and making the other one illegal has not served our state well.
Representative Candidate Connect.
Yeah, I say that with the caveat. I don't know exactly what you mean by full legalization, but yeah, I think for cannabis, we should probably move towards legalization. However, we shouldn't do so in a manner like happened with the recent THC bill. Even if the substance of the law was correct, it should be done procedurally, done so in a manner so that towns and communities have time to prepare and accurately regulate the industry. And that did not happen with the THC gummy bill that passed through the House this cycle. So we want to make sure that any legalization that does happen, whether it be sports gambling or cannabis use here, is done so in a manner that the state and cities and towns and communities can accurately prepare and regulate it.
Representative Candidate Katiza Watun.
Yes. In fact, I've already voted in support of a measure to legalize adult use cannabis here in Minnesota. It was something that I supported with hesitation at first. That bill started in the Commerce Committee. It was the first public bill of full legalization of adult use cannabis hearing in the state of Minnesota. And I have a lot of constituents who have voiced concerns to me. And so as a part of that process, the folks who worked on that bill that Representative Winkler carried, we looked at economic impact, we looked at health impact, we looked at public safety impact, and so many different things. We brought all sorts of stakeholders to the table, and that's the way to move forward on things. And I think that is critical. It'll improve access for our veterans who can't currently receive cannabis from the VA because it's not federally legalized, and it'll improve our medical marijuana program. We've already taken steps to do that.
Okay. This next question will go first to Representative Candidate Chase. Would you support the popular vote bill that allows state electors to only cast their electoral
Did I
college?
answer the previous question?
Did I miss you?
Yeah, but
Yes, you may.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, I don't
Thank you.
know. It's like, it's okay. So my answer is yes, and two reasons. The regulation of the amount of THC, so when you purchase the product, you know exactly what you're getting and how much, and you can regulate your usage. But the number one reason for me to legalize recreational marijuana is to get out of the hands of the bad guys that are taking advantage of our lax marijuana laws. But to all you young engineers and entrepreneurs out there, the number one problem I have with legalization of marijuana is we don't have the tools to test for impairment when you're pulled over. And so the police, for anyone out there that's a young engineer or entrepreneur, if you can invent the breathalyzer for THC, boy, you're gonna reap some solid benefits and help law enforcement do their job.
Thank you. Thank you for taking your turn. I appreciate
Oh,
it.
Lori made me.
Okay. Moving back on to Representative Candidate Chase. Would you support the popular vote bill that allows state electors to only cast their electoral college vote for the candidate who wins the popular vote in the nation? Please state clearly yes or no. Explain your answer in 1 minute.
I would say no, because I'm not too proud to say that I'm not all that familiar with this specific question. So I guess I'm more interested in hearing everybody else's response and doing additional research before deciding on an issue like this.
Representative Pryor.
If you would repeat the question, because I want to make sure that I get the yes or no part right.
Would you support the popular vote bill that allows state electors to only cast their electoral college vote for the candidate who wins the popular vote in the nation?
Yes. So Senator Swedzinski talks about something that you get a lot of letters about and hear from your constituents. I have heard from my constituents over the years that this is something they do support. And what we're looking at is right now, and actually I'm looking forward to hearing Steve's answer to this too, because he can probably give some good numbers on this. But we have states with low population, and they have electoral votes that outweigh these populous districts across and states in this country. So for Wyoming and Montana and states with low populations have these electoral votes that do not reflect the voters in the state. And so this is a mechanism where we can correct that. And so we go back to this fundamental principle of democracy, which is one person, one vote. And right now we don't have that.
Representative Candidate Connect.
No, we should not abolish the Electoral College. You're talking about history and how our nation was designed. Our founders were students of history, and they understood the Electoral College was created to prevent a tyranny of the majority. So it's very important that we protect minority rights and viewpoints, and the Electoral College is one way of doing that. So it's important that we appeal that presidential candidates appeal to a broad swath of candidates, not only from a population standpoint, but also geographically, and that's what the Electoral College does. So, no.
Representative Candidate Katiza Watun, would you support the popular vote bill that allows state electors to only cast their electoral college vote for the candidate who wins the popular vote in the nation?
Yes.
No explanation? Okay.
No explanation needed.
All right, all right. Senate Candidate Swedzinski.
Yes, and I appreciate, Mr. Chase, your answer. I think that's a very honest answer when, if you don't really, yeah, so I just wanted to let you know that for the public. The framers of the Constitution set up this electoral college thing, and because they did know the majority of the tyranny, and they understood all that, but we get so many letters on the will of the people. And boy, I think, 4 out of the last 5 elections, so that would be, boy, I'm gonna run out of time here. How many presidents have been elected with the minority vote? They did not get the popular vote, but they carried the Electoral College. And if I had more time to answer, I could come up with the answer, how many of that would be in just our lifetimes. And so but If we went with the popular vote, okay, it's a great question.
Senate candidate Helseth,
Okay, repeat one more time.
would you support the popular vote bill that allows state electors to only cast their electoral college vote for the candidate who wins the popular vote in the nation?
Yes, I think we should keep that vote, keep the Electoral College.
Thank you. What was that? Oh, okay. Thank you very much. We are going to move on to closing statements now. And we're going to start with Representative Candidate Pryor.
Okay. Well, again, I have to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this. It's an essential night in the campaign, and it's really our best opportunity for coming together and talking about a variety of issues. And I also deeply appreciate people that pay attention and have participated here in the audience, as well as people that may be watching it tonight or be watching it in the future. So to go back to where we started, my first election was in 2016. And when I got that phone call saying, Lori, would you consider running? It was a tough choice. I had retired from my work. I worked as a communications consultant, but I was doing childcare for my grandkids, and I was doing it full time. And I knew that I was giving up something precious to myself when I made that decision. But that was the reason I made the decision, because this is their future. And politicians need to pay attention to that generation that's coming behind us, as well as every generation that we have to make laws for. But I know that in addition to looking out for the future and our future generation, we have to pay attention to the challenges of the time. And these are challenging times. In the opening statement, I talked about listening to people. And I think that's something that I've started with, I've continued with, and I will do throughout my service as a state representative. When I'm talking to people at the door, we've been having some good conversations. But I think it's not so much about an issue, whether they agree with me or I agree with them. It's really about the understanding that we get. And what that understanding says to them, I think, is that they know that I'm somebody that they can count on. So I've been honored in these last 3 elections that people saw me as someone that they could count on to show up and do the work. Thank you for your time.
Representative Candidate Connect.
Yeah, like tens of thousands of Eden Prairie residents, I chose to live here because of our great park system, schools, civic pride, but also the Eden Prairie is a hallmark of reasonable common sense solutions and policy desires. And I'm running, like many of you, I'm exhausted by the polarization and partisanship plaguing our state and our country. I'm tired of elected officials who are too busy throwing bombs on Twitter or yelling at each other, rather than putting their head down and working for its long-term common sense solutions to help hardworking Minnesotans. I'm running to change that and change our course. I'm running to be an independent and hardworking voice for Eden Prairie to make sure that every Minnesotan flourishes. I will work for bipartisan consensus on the most polarizing and divisive issues in our state, and I'd be honored to earn your vote to do just that. Thank you.
Representative Candidate Katiza Watun.
Thanks again to the League. It's so refreshing to actually be in a room full of people again, and I've been telling folks that at the doors over and over again. I didn't door knock in 2020 because of the health concerns of COVID, and it's just great to be able to smile at people and really hear how the last few years have gone for them, and to be able to represent this community. One thing that we didn't get to talk about tonight, and I just really want to touch on briefly, is that Senator Swadzinski does chair the Civility Caucus, which is a bipartisan and bicameral organization. Senate District 49 representatives have attended each and every session, which is unheard of across the state. We are the only Senate district where each of our elected representatives prioritizes not only the needs of our constituents, but we do so by leading with civility. So I'm proud to be that representative who works for bipartisanship and who hears the needs of my community. Now, there is a saying that goes, It takes a long time to grow an old friend. And I think that that really does apply to representing the community as well. It doesn't happen overnight. And it's thrilling to see the growth and diversity of Eden Prairie over the years. I love meeting our newest residents and welcoming them to the district. But getting to know folks and learning what matters most to our neighbors, it isn't, it doesn't happen right away. And I want to thank you for all of your heartfelt conversations over the phone, via email, and at your doors over these years. My husband and I, my children, we're here for the long haul, and you can rest assured that I am focused on the future of our state, not just for my children, but for all of us. I would be honored to earn your support and your vote again this year. Together, we are building a brighter future for Minnesota. Thank you.
Senate candidate Swedinski.
Thank you, League of Women Voters, for putting this on tonight, and especially those of you in the audience that showed up. It takes, to dedicate 2 hours of your free time when you could be home watching TV or lounging in your lazy boy. We all appreciate it, all of us up here. I also want to thank all the Democratic and Republican candidates that are willing to serve, step up, and willing to sacrifice your time, your families in order to do the common good. My service in the Senate and my campaign has been focused on 4 core values: healthier and safer communities, stronger schools, civility and voting rights, and environmental preservation and protection. If you, like me, support these principles, I ask for your support tonight. I believe that my causes, my credentials, and my character qualify me for another term in the Minnesota State Senate. I also have another ask of you tonight. Take your kids, and in some of your cases, your grandkids, take your kids to the polls. Take your kids to the polls with you. Teach them how to fill out a ballot. Teach them how to talk about the issues in a respectful and intelligent manner. Teach them how democracies flourish. Teach them well. I am committed to serving the people of Minnesota with optimism and an open mind and a belief in all that is possible when we, the people, come together and find common ground for the common good. Because when we do amazing things. And number one among those amazing things is we leave this world a little bit better than we found it. Thanks again.
Senate candidate Helseth.
Thank you, and thank you to Senator Swedzinski and the other representatives here, everyone here in the panel, but thank you for the representatives and Senator for your service, your public service, and thank you to the League of Women Voters. Yes, I'm Marla Helseth, and I love the process. I love the process of campaigning. I love this country and the way that we do elect our representatives, that regular people get a say in who represents them in the state legislature. I am just a regular person. I'm just a mom who is a former teacher and have 2 kids in school. So I'm not yearning to be a politician, but I do want to bring a new voice and new energy to the Minnesota legislature and bring a new perspective. The things I'd love to focus on are things like fighting against human trafficking, education. We really do need to work together on how we can better educate our kids, get them more proficient in reading and math, and close the achievement gap. It's a little bit disgraceful how much learning loss has happened, and that's very concerning to me. And I care very much about the hardworking teachers out there who are sacrificing so much time and energy to teach our kids. Let's help them do what funding we can, and also provide more choice for parents and more transparency on curriculum. And I'm also running to help to fund public safety. Crime is a big issue. I was just at a Chinese, Eden Prairie Chinese Association. They had a cookout, a potluck recently at, I want to say Round Lake Park. No, Riley Lake, whatever. We were there, and everyone I talked to said that crime was the big issue for them. So I really would love to do what we can in the legislature to fund our police, help our police, and thank you very much. I would love your support.
Represent candidate Chase.
Yeah, thanks for everybody coming out tonight. This is really my first attempt at politics and understanding the process. It's just fascinating, really going deep into it right off the bat, because I've been in corporate America the last 15 years, learning and understanding budgeting and prioritizing. That's really what I've found is the most important thing about running a business. Talking to CEOs, CFOs, all the directors, trying to get them to prioritize where they want to go. And I think that's really the most important thing here, right? We're all looking to direct your funds. You're paying money into the state, and we need to pay it out a certain way. And it's prioritizing what matters to Minnesota. I believe in what I've been hearing at the doors and talking to people, and just statistically, the most important 3 items are the economy right now. We don't know what's going on after COVID. We don't know where inflation's going to end. And we need to focus a lot of attention on that right now. Balancing a budget that it focuses on our priorities for the state. We also absolutely need to focus on public safety. That's the next priority that we've seen the statistics over the last 2 to 3 years. They've just shot up. I don't want to go into the details because it's not enjoyable at all, but we know it's there. People are concerned. We need to focus on that. We need to get safety back in our communities, not just Eden Prairie. We are at the state level. This is a state problem. And finally, education system. It's been slipping as well for the last 10 years. We've heard that they're not getting funded, but the reality is 2016 to 2019, all 3 school districts for this Senate district have been funded above and beyond inflation. I think it's a systematic problem at the state level. So I think that's my third and maybe most important focus. Thank you.
Okay. I want to thank the candidates very much for your time and answering these questions. The League of Women Voters really appreciates it. We really want to thank our audience and the people that are viewing this. And we want to remind you that the views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates, not those of the League of Women Voters. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
I know.
No, that was, thank you, thank you.
Left that out as a message. When I came to her door, she said that you spoke highly of her. And I just wanted to let you know as a fellow candidate that means the world. And I wish more of us had that. Because when we build each other up, instead of knocking each other down, and then all of a sudden you're
It wasn't hard to do. You're a good man. I committed the few times